What does it take to get into an elite business school? MBA Crystal Ball is a boutique admissions consulting firm. Each year, we help a select few applicants get into the world's best business schools. Here's one of our success stories to inspire and educate.
Today we have with us Apoorva, who will be joining this fall at Kellogg. She also has many other admits with her, including Cornell, Stern, and Darden. So hello, Apoorva. Hello and welcome.
Hello. Hi, Manish. How are you?
Good. Thanks for taking time to talk to us. I think for our viewers, what would be great is if you could just tell us a little about your early life, what kind of extracurriculars you were involved in.
Right. So I think I was someone who was very bright academically since the beginning. I was the school topper during middle school and high school. And I think because of how I had been brought up, I had a fair degree of exposure to extracurriculars. So I did a lot of extracurriculars during school as well. I was involved in a lot of art competitions, public speaking, quizzes, spell bee competitions, etc. Eventually, I don't think I put in a lot of brain into what I want to do during undergrad. I just picked up engineering because like my dad was from IIT. So it's just something that came up naturally. So ultimately, I pursued my engineering in electronics and communication at NSIT. During college as well, I was fairly involved in a lot of extracurricular activities. So I was the vice president at the Finance and Economics Society at our college. I led the business conclave of our college as well, which had a team of 100 plus, and we organized several events like case study competitions, mock stock market simulations, etc. And then I was also involved in the public relations and student affairs society of our college. So that was basically around covering college events, managing the official YouTube channel of the college, etc. I definitely loved poetry, so that was something that I was also a part of. So the Poetry Society of NSIT. And I also had a brief stint at Social Impact with an NGO where I was involved in visiting different orphanages and organizing certain art workshops. So yeah, that was my undergrad experience in brief.
Excellent. I mean, yeah, so you're pretty much your plate full. Yeah, and tell us, how did you kind of transition into the professional world? How was that experience?
Right. Another thing that I was really obsessed about in my undergrad was case study competitions. So I think I did around 10 plus over 3 years. Through these case study competitions, I was really exposed to the world of data. I loved the number crunching that was involved. And that is when I decided that I would basically sit for business analyst slash data analyst kind of profiles during placement. And that's how I ultimately came to American Express. That was an on campus placement that I secured. And it was essentially a product analyst slash business analyst kind of role. I was honestly not very sure how the work would look like, but as fate would have it, I was placed in a central product team within American Express. So for the first 2 years of my work experience, I was in core product analytics. And post my promotion for the next 2 years, my role evolved in the sense that I was involved in managing platform health, more around data architecture and establishing data pipelines. So I think my role was really interesting in two aspects. First, that the team was very central to American Express, which meant that I got a lot of opportunity to have cross-functional collaboration with teams such as risk, marketing, compliance, underwriting, etc. So I think that gave me a lot of exposure very early in my career. And I think the second interesting aspect was when I joined the team was fairly small and there was rapid expansion that I saw. I could see firsthand the problems that evolved with that rapid expansion. So, there was a lot of evolution of product strategies that I saw firsthand. And that really helped me shape, my career journey. So yeah, I think overall it was a very fulfilling work experience at Amex.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like we discussed, you did not sort of relent your extracurriculars. You kind of continued on those as well. I mean, tell us how were you able to manage it? What all were you doing?
Right. So I think extracurriculars has always been like a big part of my life, and I continued that at American Express. So I was involved in the founding team of the mentor-mentee program of our team. So we basically built profiles of mentors and mentees and, like paired them up together because we realized the importance of mentorship early in early stages of your career. That was a program that was a huge hit and impacted almost 100 plus colleagues. I was involved in a lot of diversity related initiatives, be it Pride Month celebrations or Black History Month celebrations. Then something that was very close to my heart was also on the social front. So I was involved in the Good Citizenship Wing, which is like the corporate social responsibility wing of American Express. And I was involved in a lot of initiatives like silent auction. Then there was a Daan Utsav where we essentially like donated around 20,000 kgs of grains to NGOs. Then there were NGO visits where I was again involved in art workshops, and then there was also a blood donation drive. These were all events that were very close to my heart, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time. I was also involved in certain leadership and development related initiatives. So I launched a newsletter around different leadership attributes. So yeah, these were some of the activities that I undertook.
Right. Like undergrad, essentially your plate was full, right? When and how did you kind of start thinking of an MBA? What was your journey up until the point you kind of started your applications? Including GMAT and all that thought process.
I think, like, as I mentioned, I was a very academic oriented student. So from the very, almost like in my third or fourth year of college, I knew that I wanted to pursue like a second degree. So it was more about what and when for me. So in fourth year itself, I started researching the various options which aligned with my interest. I, looked up courses such as Masters in Data Science, Masters in Business Analytics, Masters in Engineering Management, and there was also MBA. So one thing I was really clear about was the fact that this time, unlike undergrad, this needs to be a very thoughtful process. And that's why I wanted to spend some time in the industry, really getting to know myself and what I wanted to do. Over the years in American Express, I think I was very lucky and I'm very grateful that I could have a lot of mentors. So not just based out of India, but also people based out of US. And then there was also the fact that I have my, maternal uncle who's based out of US. He's been there for almost 20 years. So he also acted like a mentor of sorts while discussing various career options. So by the time, I could get grasp of what I really wanted to do, that's when MBA totally aligned with those goals. And as far as pursuing an MBA from abroad goes, that is surely because I wanted international exposure and I really wanted to push beyond my comfort zone. So that's when, the entire MBA picture came in. I started with my GMAT prep in late 2022. So I think like I'm going to be honest, like I think I underestimated the exam. I thought that, like when you do like a quick Google search, you basically come across that you'll be able to get done with GMAT in 3 months. And that's what I thought. So, I thought that it'll be an easy ride with, I'll be able to apply across R1 and R2, but that did not happen. Like ultimately my final GMAT score, which was a 760, came in end of August, which also meant that I could not apply to a lot of R1's schools in the round one. So yeah, that's a bit about my GMAT journey.
And so the point that you just mentioned about thinking about masters versus MBA, what kind of helped you sort of decide between one versus the other? Because that's a common sort of dilemma that many professionals face in their journeys.
Right. There were a couple of aspects that I factored in. First was like when I just like researched through the courses of different master's programs, a lot of it was based out of hard skills, which I felt like a majority of those I already possessed as part of my work experience, or I felt like I could learn on my own. So that was one aspect. The second aspect was, by the time I had clarity on what I wanted to do, like in the long term, I already had 3 years of work experience. So I was already above average for most of these courses. So that was another aspect. The third aspect was just in general conversations with mentors in US, and especially like my maternal uncle, who, helped me see the longer term picture, how an MBA provides a greater network for pivoting across industries and functions. So that's how the choice eventually came in.
Excellent. Yeah, that's very, very useful, because, yeah, I mean, as I said, a common dilemma that many professionals face. Now, I mean, while you had a lot of things going for you, right? I mean, in terms of your score, your experience and all that, what were your concerns? Did you have any concerns going into this process? And talk about your
Yes.
candidature, your application and all that.
Right. So I definitely had a couple of concerns. So first, as I mentioned, like my GMAT got delayed, and that meant that I couldn't apply to especially like the M7s in round one. Going into the process, I knew that I don't want to reapply. So, I had heard a lot of horror stories about reapplications, like, and having given multiple GMAT attempts, I just didn't want to go through that entire application procedure again. So that's why I would say that I was not very selective when it came to schools, because A, I had only R2 to apply, and second, I really wanted to go this year. That was a concern, that I had to handle so many applications within those 2.5 months. So that was definitely, one of the top concerns. Second was essentially came from a tech background, and I think it's very important for Indian people to in general differentiate themselves when they're coming from a tech background. So that was definitely another concern. And I think the third concern which came up in our conversations during brainstorming was the fact that even though I had breadth of extracurriculars, it lacked depth. So that was also something that kept on roaming in my mind, that how do I get into that depth of extracurriculars. So yeah, I think those were my top three concerns.
Sure, sure. And I mean, as you were looking for partners on this journey, I mean, tell us, I mean, what was your process like? How did you kind of discover MBA Crystal Ball? What was your experience like working with us?
So how did I, go about choosing an admission consultant was like I connected to a lot of my seniors, college undergrad seniors, or even other folks who had, gone through this entire process before. And one thing that they said was that you have those initial calls with each of the consultants as per your budget, and then you basically do like a vibe check. Who do you feel comfortable with? So that's how I went about. I shortlisted a list of, I think, 8 9 consultants which were in my budget, and then I had that initial brainstorming session with them, and I was trying to assess the comfort level. So I think that really matched with MBA Crystal Ball. So I could feel that comfort that I can share all of my personal stories. So that was there. And I think the second aspect why I went with MCB was the fact that I felt during the conversation there was no selling ploy that was really employed, which I felt with some of the other consultants. And also, like, I remember having our first conversation, and you essentially kind of scared me a little because you did not paint that rosy picture. So I think that was important to get that reality check. That I think a lot of people, when they come into the process, they feel like GMAT is a very big part of the entire procedure. While it is, the applications are, I think, equally important. And I think that reality check was important for me to, get myself back into that gear of grinding for the next 2 to 2.5 months for the applications. So I think that's why I went with MCB. And once I started the process of applications with MCB, there were a lot of moments where I found evidence that my decision was actually correct. For instance, our brainstorming sessions, they were essentially untimed. I remember some of our conversations going beyond 2 hours. So that really helped me felt heard. And I felt like ample amount of effort was being put into the applications from your end as well. And I think the second aspect was there was a lot of creative liberty that was provided. And I feel like creativity is a big part of my personality. And by the end, when essays really shaped up, I could feel that they really reflect me. For instance, like we started the essays with poems. So I think, like, overall, I think you also made me fall in love with the entire application procedure. I remember, like, when I wrote my GSB essay specifically, I was like almost in tears because it was so emotional and so personal. So I think, yeah, these are the things that really worked for me.
Awesome. And I think you had a pretty good run, right? I mean, tell us what kind of interviews invite, how many did you get? How was the experience? And especially, any standout experience, right? One or two, interviews that really stood out for you when you did that.
Right. So I was just like reading on GMAT blogs and GMAT Club and all other blogs that there are. Contrary to most of their experiences, I found that there was a direct correlation between how my interview went and what was the ultimate result. In terms of interview invites, I received an interview invite from all the colleges that I applied to except Wharton. So I think I applied to 9 or 10 colleges, which is a lot, by the way. So I was really elated in terms of the interview invites. As far as preparation goes, again, I signed up with MCB for my interview prep, and I think 1 or 2 mocks are more than enough for any candidate, I think, because most of the MBA interviews are pretty straightforward. They ask essentially the same questions like why MBA, what are your short term, long term goals, and you have a set of 8 to 10 professional stories which you essentially prepare for all the behavioral questions that come as part of the interview. In terms of standout experiences, I think Kellogg was definitely one of the standout experiences because, there are these interviews when during the interview you can totally gauge that the person really likes you. And I think that's what happened in Kellogg and also Haas, I remember. Another standout experience on the other end of the spectrum was Stanford because it was absolutely terrible for me. So it was like by a Stanford alum and ran up to like 1.5 hours, and there were almost 20 plus behavioral questions that he asked. So by the time it came to the end of the interview, I had run out of professional stories, to be honest. So yeah, that was another thing that was a lesson in itself. So yeah, that was my interview experience.
Right, right. And I mean, now, the big reveal, right? I mean, where all did you get in? And I mean, also, I mean, I think you also had your fair share of rejection, right? I mean, how did you take that in stride, where you are headed? Tell us more about that.
I got into Kellogg, NYU Stern, Berkeley Haas, Darden, Cornell, and CMU. So these were the colleges that I received an admit with, some of them with good scholarships as well. I received a reject from Stanford and I was waitlisted at MIT, Booth, Fuqua, and Ross. Now, by the time, Kellogg decision had come, so I was pretty, happy with going for Kellogg. So I didn't really pursue the waitlist at any of these colleges. In fact, I withdrew my application from Ross and Fuqua, so didn't really see what happened there. Ultimately, there was a reject from Booth, and interestingly, I'm still waitlisted at MIT. I don't know. So that was my journey. In terms of handling rejections, GSB was obviously like it felt a little sad, but at the same time I did not have a lot of hopes after how the interview went, so I was kind of mentally prepared for that. Other than that, I genuinely wanted to go either to Booth, MIT, or Kellogg, and since Kellogg happened, that too with scholarship, so I was just like really elated about that. So fortunately, I was one of those few lucky people who did not have to face a lot of rejections in general. So yeah, that was about my journey.
Excellent, excellent. And I mean, as a closing note, I mean, if you were to sort of sum up all your experience journey and into like 2 or 3 sort of takeaways that someone with your background or Indians in general, right? I mean, were to learn, what would you say?
Probably say a few things about GMAT in general and then about applications.
Sure.
So regarding GMAT, I think one of the biggest mistakes someone can do is to underestimate the exam. So keep at least 8 to 9 months with you for the exam and not just the bare minimum 3 months, because you don't know whether you'll be you want retakes or not. So that would be number one. Second, in terms of GMAT, I think what really worked for me in my last attempt was absolute consistency. I remember like doing like a quant mock every day for 21 days straight. So I think that's the kind of consistency the exam really demands towards the end of your prep. So I'd really emphasize on that. And the third is the fact that, especially coming from an engineering background, a lot of us have went through the JE prep, and we are very hard bent on some of the ways through which we solve quant questions. And I realized pretty late into the entire prepping journey that unlearning is a very big part of GMAT preparation as well. So I had to unlearn some of the ways I used to solve questions and learn new, better, more efficient techniques. So I think I would really emphasize on that as well, especially for engineering students. Coming to the application part, again, I would definitely not recommend applying to 9 or 10 schools. You definitely should be more selective in your school selection. And ideal would be that, you get done with your GMAT earlier, and then you distribute your applications between round 1 and round 2. That will not just save you a lot of effort, but also a lot of money as well, because each of these applications is $200 to $250. So that would be, number one. And second, what I felt was that, when I sat down to write my essays, some of the professional stories had been long back, like, in my first year of corporate experience. So I had to, really, scratch for PPTs or Excel sheets so that, to remind myself what had really happened. So I would suggest that if someone is thinking of MBA or in general masters as well, it would be helpful, like right from, first year of your corporate journey, you have a diary of sorts where you just document your personal and, professional experiences. So I think that would be really helpful in general, not just for MBA interviews, but any interviews in general. I think even during recruitment, all of these questions come again, which you are expected to tell. So I think documenting these stories would be really, really helpful. And I think the third aspect would be just talk to as many people as possible. I feel that pay it forward is a big part of USB schools in general. And you'd be surprised how much people are willing to help. Just a normal LinkedIn drop really helps. And some of the people which I interacted with, they have essentially now become my mentors, who I really reached out to when I got those wait lists, or when, I was deciding between schools. And I think they're going to be part of my journey going forward as well. So it is really important to cultivate these relationships while you are in this process. So yeah, that would be my 2 cents.
Very useful, Apoorva. Thanks for sharing all that. And thank you again for spending this time with us. All the best with your Kellogg journey.
Thank you, Manish.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
We hope you found this interview helpful. At MBA Crystal Ball, we've helped many applicants get into the elite business schools, often with scholarships. Reach out if you're looking for professional help with your applications. Good luck.